The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years. The Galactic Assembly, a union of 412 species, maintained order through diplomacy, trade, and the shared understanding that war benefited no one. Humanity had joined this great civilization only 40 years ago, a young species still learning the ways of the stars. They were considered primitive by many, emotional by most, and insignificant by nearly all. The humans had spread to 17 colony worlds, built modest trade routes, and tried their best to fit into a universe that largely ignored them. The Empire watched humanity with different eyes. Commander stood on the bridge of the flagship, his 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. His species had ruled 37 star systems for 800 years. They were conquerors, warriors, and above all, they were proud. They stood 9 feet tall, their skin like polished obsidian, their eyes burning with inner fire. They had joined the Galactic Assembly not because they believed in peace, but because they understood patience. They waited for the right moment, the right target, the right message to send to the galaxy. Humanity was that message. The human colony of New Eden orbited a yellow star in the outer regions of assembly space. 10 million humans called it home. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and families. Children played in parks designed to look like old Earth. Old men sat on benches and talked about the home world they would never see again. Young couples planned futures full of hope. New Eden was everything humanity dreamed of when they reached for the stars. Had chosen it carefully. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace without warning. 40 warships surrounded the small colony world, their weapons powered and ready. New Eden had no military presence, only a small security force meant to handle minor disputes. They sent desperate messages to Earth, to the Assembly, to anyone who would listen. They jammed every signal. Captain Maria Santos commanded the colony's defense station. She was 43 years old, a former Earth Navy officer who had retired to help build something new. When the fleet appeared on her screens, she knew immediately what it meant. She had studied their history, their culture, their methods. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They made examples. Maria sent her husband and children to the underground shelters. She kissed them goodbye and told them she would see them soon. She knew it was a lie, but some lies were necessary. They established a broadcast. They tapped into every communication network in the galaxy, every screen, every device capable of receiving a signal. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds watched as Commander appeared before them. His voice was cold, his words precise. "The galaxy has grown weak," announced. "The Assembly speaks of peace while species like humanity spread like insects across the stars. They are beneath us. They are beneath all of you. Today, we remind the galaxy what true power looks like. Today, we remind you why the Empire should be feared." The bombardment began. Orbital cannons fired concentrated plasma into New Eden cities. The shots were precise, calculated to cause maximum suffering. They did not target infrastructure or military installations. They targeted population centers, schools, hospitals, residential districts. They wanted the galaxy to see humans die. They wanted to see fear in the eyes of a species that had no way to fight back. The broadcast showed everything. 10 million humans watched their world burn. Families huddled together as fire fell from the sky. Parents shielded children who would never grow up. Heroes emerged in those final hours, ordinary people who carried strangers to shelters, who faced death with defiance rather than despair. Captain Maria Santos broadcast a final message before the defense station was destroyed. Her face was bloody, her voice steady. "We will not beg," she said. "We will not surrender. Remember us. Remember what they did, and when the time comes, make them pay." They laughed at her words, found them amusing, the desperate defiance of a dying species. He ordered his ships to complete the destruction. Every city was reduced to ash. Every shelter was buried under rubble. Every man, woman, and child on New Eden was killed. The process took 6 hours. The broadcast continued the entire time. The galaxy watched in horror. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species demanded action. They had violated every law, every treaty, every principle the Assembly stood for. Diplomats shouted and argued and threatened. They passed resolutions condemning the attack. They imposed sanctions on the Empire. They spoke of consequences and justice and the rule of law. They ignored them. Commander had calculated perfectly. The Assembly was powerful in numbers but weak in resolve. No species wanted to start a war, no matter how justified. The sanctions were meaningless to an empire that valued conquest over trade. The resolutions were words without teeth. They had killed 10 million humans, and the galaxy had responded with disappointment. Humanity responded differently. Earth received the broadcast 7 hours after it began, the signal traveling at the speed of light across the void between stars. People gathered in homes and public squares, watching in silence as their brothers and sisters died. 10 million faces, 10 million stories, 10 million futures erased while the galaxy watched and did nothing. The grief was overwhelming. The anger was absolute. President addressed the world 12 hours after the broadcast ended. She was 61 years old, a former soldier who had led humanity through the difficult early years of interstellar expansion. Her face showed no tears, only stone. Her voice carried no emotion, only certainty. They have made their statement, she said. They believe humanity is weak. They believe we will accept this atrocity. They believe we will let the galaxy forget what they did. She paused, her eyes finding the camera. They are wrong. The speech was short. There were no threats, no promises of revenge, no detailed plans. Humanity did not need speeches. They needed action. Within hours, every shipyard on Earth and every colony world began working at full capacity. Factories that produced civilian goods converted to military production. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to develop weapons. Soldiers who had never known war trained for battles that would define their species. The galaxy noticed the change, but did not understand it. Other species had been attacked before. They mourned their dead, rebuilt their worlds, and eventually moved on. The Assembly was designed to prevent such tragedies but accepted them when prevention failed. Life continued. Memory faded. This was the way of the galaxy. Humanity had not existed in the galaxy long enough to learn this lesson. Admiral James sat in his office on Earth, reviewing reports from across human space. He was 70 years old, the highest-ranking military officer in the United Earth Forces. He had spent his career training for a war that most believed would never come. Now it had come, and he was not ready. No one was ready. They had 40 warships in their fleet. Humanity had 12, and none of them could match firepower. He called a meeting of his senior commanders. They gathered in a secure room deep beneath the surface of Earth, away from any possible surveillance. These were the men and women who would plan humanity's response. They were soldiers, strategists, and dreamers who had always believed humanity was meant for something greater than survival. Commander Sarah spoke first. She was 45, brilliant and ruthless, the architect of humanity's defensive strategies. "The Assembly won't help us," she said. "They've made that clear. They are too powerful and we're too insignificant. If we want justice, we have to take it ourselves." General Williams shook his head. He was the oldest among them, a veteran who had fought in the last wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. "We can't win a conventional war. Their ships are faster, stronger, and more numerous. We attack them directly, and they'll do to Earth what they did to New Eden." Admiral leaned forward. "Then we don't fight a conventional war." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. Humanity had always been different from the other species in the galaxy. They were younger, yes. They were weaker, certainly. But they had something the galaxy had forgotten. They had a capacity for violence that other species had evolved past. They had a darkness that civilization had buried but never destroyed. Explained his plan. It would take years to execute. It would require sacrifices that no other species would accept. It would change humanity forever, transforming them from peaceful explorers into something the galaxy had never seen. When he finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Commander nodded. "We do it." One by one, the others agreed. There was no debate, no hesitation. They had killed 10 million humans. They had broadcast it to the galaxy as entertainment. They had laughed at Captain Maria Santos as she promised retribution. They believed humanity was too weak to respond, too insignificant to matter. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first year after New Eden was quiet. Humanity mourned its dead, rebuilt its forces, and watched the galaxy continue as if nothing had happened. They celebrated their victory, adding the massacre to their long history of conquests. Commander received honors and promotions, his status rising among his people. The galaxy slowly forgot about the 10 million humans who had died. Humanity did not forget. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, construction began on a facility that did not officially exist. It was called Project Remembrance, though only a handful of people knew that name. Scientists worked around the clock, developing technologies that humanity had never needed before. Weapons that could pierce armor, ships that could match speed, strategies that could overcome numbers. They also developed something else, something darker. Dr. Torres led the Biological Research Division. She was a geneticist, one of the best in human space, who had spent her career trying to cure diseases and extend human. Now she worked on something very different. They were stronger than humans, faster than humans, more resilient than humans. Dr. Torres was finding ways to change that. The research was classified at the highest levels. Only President and Admiral knew the full scope of what was being developed. When completed, it would give humanity an advantage they could never anticipate. It would also cross lines that most civilizations considered sacred. Dr. Torres did not care about sacred lines. Her daughter had lived on New Eden. On the colony world of, a young man named David Park began his military training. He was 22 years old, an engineer who had been building bridges before the attack. His parents had moved to New Eden 5 years before the massacre. They had invited him to visit, but he had been too busy with work. Now they were gone, along with his 2 younger sisters and his grandmother who had finally agreed to leave Earth. David completed basic training in half the expected time. He excelled at everything: combat, tactics, technical skills, leadership. His instructors recognized something in him that went beyond natural ability. He had purpose. He had focus. He had rage. They assigned him to a special program, one that recruited soldiers with exceptional potential and trained them for missions that conventional forces could not handle. David did not ask questions. He did not need explanations. He knew what he was being prepared for, and he welcomed it. The program was commanded by a woman known only as Director Stone. No one knew her real name or her history. Some said she had been an intelligence officer. Others claimed she had been an assassin. The truth was that she had been both, and much more besides. She had spent her career in the shadows, doing the things that needed to be done so that others could sleep peacefully. Now she was building an army of shadows. The training lasted 18 months. David learned things that no university taught: how to kill quietly, how to survive impossible situations, how to become invisible in plain sight. He learned the language, their customs, their weaknesses. He studied their technology until he understood it better than most engineers. He trained alongside soldiers from every human colony, men and women who had all lost something to the massacre. They were forged into weapons, human weapons. Director Stone gathered them together when the training was complete. There were 200 of them, the best humanity had to offer. They stood in rows, their faces blank, their bodies ready. Stone walked among them, examining each one. "You have been chosen," she said, "because you understand something that the galaxy has forgotten. You understand that some crimes cannot be forgiven. Some enemies cannot be negotiated with. Some debts must be paid in blood. She stopped in front of David. They believe they are predators and we are prey. They believe their strength makes them invincible. They have never faced an enemy willing to do whatever it takes to destroy them. They have never faced humans who have nothing left to lose. David met her eyes without flinching. When do we begin? Stone smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Soon, very soon. The second year brought changes that the galaxy began to notice. Human trade ships increased their security, carrying weapons that seemed more advanced than they should be. Human diplomats grew cold and distant, their smiles never reaching their eyes. Human colonies built defenses that worried even friendly species. The Assembly sent observers to investigate. They found nothing unusual. The humans were simply being cautious, they reported, a natural response to trauma. They would calm down eventually. They would learn to accept their place in the galaxy. The observers did not know about the ships being built in hidden shipyards. They did not know about the weapons being tested on isolated asteroids. They did not know about the soldiers training in underground facilities. They did not know about the virus being engineered in sealed laboratories. They did not know about Project Sky Forgotten. Admiral chose the name himself. It came from an old Earth saying, "The sky forgets no one." He believed it meant that history remembered everything, that nothing was truly lost. Others interpreted it differently, especially after they learned what the project actually was. Sky Forgotten was not a ship or a weapon or a strategy. It was a doctrine. It was a promise. It was the name humanity gave to its coming revenge. They would not be defeated in a single battle. They were too powerful, too numerous, too spread across the galaxy. Destroying them would require patience, precision, and absolute commitment. It would require humanity to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen. The doctrine was simple: no mercy. Every military installation would be destroyed. Every warship would be hunted. Every colony would be isolated and contained. The species that had killed 10 million humans would learn what it meant to face an enemy that did not negotiate, did not forgive, did not stop. And when the war was over, the galaxy would remember. They would remember what happened to those who attacked humanity. They would remember the price of 10 million lives. They would remember that humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. Commander received intelligence reports about increased human activity. He dismissed them as insignificant. The humans were building ships. His fleet could destroy anything they produced. They were training soldiers. His warriors had been fighting for centuries. They were developing weapons. His scientists had technologies humans could not comprehend. He made a formal statement to the Galactic Assembly, mocking humanity's feeble attempts at rearmament. He invited other species to join in keeping the humans contained, preventing them from growing beyond their station. Several species quietly agreed, not because they supported but because they feared what humanity might become if left unchecked. Others refused. They remembered the broadcast. They remembered the faces of the humans who had died. They remembered Captain Maria Santos, bloodied but unbroken, promising that her species would make the pay. Some species began to wonder if humanity was not as weak as everyone believed. The third year began with an incident that the galaxy barely noticed. A supply ship disappeared on the edge of their territory. The crew was found dead, floating in space, their ship intact but completely empty of cargo. There were no signs of conventional weapons fire. There were no distress signals. There were only bodies. They investigated but found nothing. They blamed pirates, though no pirate group claimed responsibility. They increased patrols, though no attackers were ever found. They moved on, treating it as an isolated incident. 2 weeks later, another ship disappeared, then another, then 3 more. Commander began to suspect the truth. He ordered his intelligence officers to focus on human activity to find evidence of their involvement. They found nothing. The attacks were too clean, too professional, too different from anything humans were supposed to be capable of. The attacks continued. On a remote military base, sensors detected an intruder. Security forces searched the facility for 6 hours. They found nothing. The next morning, the base commander was dead in his quarters, killed by a method that left no traces. A message was written on the wall in his own blood. Remember New Eden. The finally understood. The prey had become predators. The victims had become hunters. The species they had dismissed as insignificant was reaching out from the shadows, striking without warning, disappearing without trace. Demanded a meeting with human representatives. He wanted to threaten them, to warn them that their provocations would be met with overwhelming force. The human ambassador listened politely, his face betraying nothing. "I don't know what you're talking about," the ambassador said. "Humanity remains committed to peace. We have no involvement in whatever difficulties you're experiencing." Knew he was lying. He knew with absolute certainty that humans were behind the attacks, but he had no proof, no evidence, nothing he could present to the assembly. The humans were playing a game he had never encountered, a game where strength and direct confrontation meant nothing. He decided to teach them another lesson. The fleet assembled near human space, a show of force meant to intimidate. 50 warships, the largest gathering since the New Eden massacre, transmitted a message directly to Earth, warning that any further aggression would be met with total destruction. The response came not from Earth, but from the void between stars. A human ship appeared from nowhere, a vessel no one had seen before. It was small, barely the size of a fighter, painted black against the darkness of space. It should have been insignificant, a gnat before giants. The ship broadcast a single message, transmitted on all frequencies. "This is the UES Forgotten. We are humanity's answer to New Eden. We are the price you pay for 10 million lives. We are the debt that will never be forgiven." Before any ship could react, the Forgotten fired a single weapon. The shot struck the nearest warship and punched through its armor like it was paper. The ship exploded, killing 3,000 in an instant. The Forgotten vanished before the fleet could respond. Commander stared at the debris of his destroyed vessel, understanding for the first time what humanity had become. They were not the primitive species he had dismissed. They were not the weak prey he had slaughtered for entertainment. They were something new, something dangerous, something he had helped create. The war had begun, and they had already lost the first battle. Admiral watched the battle footage from his office on Earth. The attack had been a calculated risk, revealing one of humanity's new weapons before the full fleet was ready. But the psychological impact was worth the strategic cost. They now knew that their ships were vulnerable. They now knew that humanity could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. More importantly, the galaxy knew. Species across the assembly watched the footage with different reactions. Some were horrified that humans had developed such weapons. Others were impressed by the audacity of the attack. A few quietly began to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side. Turned to Commander, who had overseen the operation. "How soon until the full fleet is ready?" 6 months, she replied. "Maybe less if we push the shipyards harder." "Push them harder. They won't wait. They'll try to strike before we're ready." Nodded, and the other projects. Was silent for a moment. The other projects were the ones that kept him awake at night, the ones that would define humanity's future. They were necessary. He believed that, but he also knew that they would change everything. "Continue as planned," he said finally. "We finish what they started." In the darkness between stars, the UES Forgotten continued its hunt. David Park sat in the pilot's seat, watching the void for signs of pursuit. His ship was humanity's most advanced creation, equipped with weapons and technologies that would have seemed like magic 5 years ago. He was one of 200 operators trained to use these ships, and he was one of the best. He thought about his parents, his sisters, his grandmother. He thought about the 10 million people who had died while the galaxy watched. He thought about Captain Maria Santos, her final words echoing through time. "Make them pay," she had said. David intended to honor that request. He intended to make the pay for every life they had taken. He intended to hunt them until there was nothing left to hunt. The Forgotten slipped through space, invisible and deadly, searching for its next target. The first strike had been a warning. The second would be a statement. The galaxy would learn to fear humanity. They would learn to regret their choice. And the 10 million dead of New Eden would be remembered not as victims, but as the reason their species rose to become something the universe had never seen. Sky Forgotten was just beginning. The Empire had never known fear. For 800 years they had conquered and enslaved, crushed rebellions, and destroyed civilizations. Other species trembled at the mention of their name. Empires fell before their fleets. Planets surrendered at the sight of their ships. Fear was something they created. It was not something they experienced. That began to change in the months following the first attack. The UES Forgotten struck again 3 days after its first appearance. A patrol squadron, 6 ships strong, was conducting routine operations near the border of human space. They detected nothing unusual. Their sensors showed empty void in every direction. They followed their standard patrol routes, confident in their superiority. The Forgotten appeared behind them, emerging from some invisible fold in space. It destroyed 2 ships before the remaining 4 could even turn to face the threat. The other ships opened fire, pouring plasma and missiles into the coordinates where the human vessel had been. They hit nothing but empty space. David Park watched from a distance, having already moved to a new position. The technology could not track his ship. Their weapons could not catch his movements. Their warriors, for all their strength and experience, were fighting an enemy they could not see. He destroyed the remaining ships one by one. Each attack came from a different angle, a different distance. They never knew where the next shot would come from. They died confused, frustrated, and afraid. When the last ship exploded, David transmitted the same message that would become humanity's signature in the months ahead. 3 words that they learned to dread. Remember New Eden. Commander received the reports in his command center, surrounded by officers who had served him for decades. They had followed him through countless battles, trusting his judgment absolutely. Now they looked at him with uncertainty in their eyes. They did not question his leadership openly, but they questioned it in their hearts. 8 ships destroyed, no human casualties, no clear tactics they could counter, no way to predict where the next attack would come. The assembly is pressuring us to respond, his second-in-command reported. Other species are questioning our ability to handle this situation. Turned to face the officer, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of authority. They question us. We are the Empire. We have conquered half the galaxy. The humans are not like other species we have faced, the officer replied carefully. Their tactics are unusual. Understood what his officer could not say directly. They had always won through overwhelming force. They found their enemies, gathered their fleets, and destroyed everything in their path. This strategy worked against species that fought the same way. Humanity did not fight the same way. The Forgotten was just one ship, but it was a symbol of something larger. The humans were not trying to match the in strength. They were not building a fleet to face them in direct battle. They were hunting from the shadows, striking where they were weak, disappearing before any response could be organized. It was a strategy of patience, a strategy of fear, a strategy that they had no experience countering. Made a decision. If humanity wanted to hunt his ships, he would give them targets they could not resist. He would set traps using his own vessels as bait, surrounding them with hidden forces ready to destroy any attacker. The humans might be clever, but they were also emotional. They wanted revenge. They would take risks to achieve it. He would use that against them. The trap was set near a supply depot, a station that distributed resources to the Empire's outer colonies. A single transport ship was scheduled to pass through, apparently undefended. In reality, 20 warships waited in ambush, hidden behind sensor-blocking screens that made them invisible to all known detection methods. David Park received intelligence about the transport 3 days before it was scheduled to arrive. The information came through channels that humanity had established in the 2 years since New Eden, a network of spies, informants, and stolen data that gave them insight into operations. Director Stone reviewed the intelligence personally. She saw the opportunity, but she also saw the risk. They were not stupid. They knew the Forgotten would target isolated ships. They would eventually try to use that pattern against humanity. It could be a trap, she told David during their briefing. He nodded. Probably is. You want to go anyway? David considered the question. He thought about the 10 million dead, the faces he had memorized from the broadcast, the family he would never see again. He thought about the fear in voices when they realized they were under attack. He thought about the message he delivered with every kill. They killed 10 million people for entertainment, he said finally. They laughed while children burned. Every ship I destroy, every I kill makes them afraid. Fear is a weapon. The more afraid they become, the more mistakes they make. Stone smiled. It was the same cold expression she always wore. Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. She provided him with additional resources. 2 more ships from the Forgotten class, operated by pilots he had trained with. Together, they would face whatever trap they had prepared. They would show the Empire that humanity could not be predicted or contained. The attack began exactly as they had planned. The Forgotten appeared near the transport, emerging from stealth to fire on the apparently defenseless target. The hidden warships powered up their engines, surrounding the human vessel in a sphere of overwhelming firepower. They expected the Forgotten to run. They expected fear, desperation, a frantic attempt to escape the trap. Instead, the human ship stopped moving entirely. It hung in space, making no attempt to evade. David's voice came over the communication channel, broadcast to every ship. Commander, I know you're watching. I know you set this trap. I want you to pay attention to what happens next. The 2 other human ships appeared simultaneously, positioned at perfect angles to the formation. Before the warships could adjust their positions, all 3 Forgotten-class vessels fired together. Their weapons were not aimed at the transport or the surrounding ships. They were aimed at the sensor-blocking screens that hid the ambush. The screens exploded in cascades of energy, revealing the hidden warships to every sensor in the region. But more importantly, the explosion disrupted the ship's own sensors, blinding them for crucial seconds. In those seconds, the 3 human ships scattered in different directions, too fast for the disoriented fleet to track. David spoke again as he disappeared into the void. You thought we would fall for an obvious trap. You thought we were desperate enough to take any target. You still don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not fighting to win battles. We're fighting to win a war. And wars are won through patience, not pride. The ship searched for hours but found nothing. The human vessels had vanished completely. No debris, no trail, no sign they had ever been there. Commander watched the failed ambush with growing fury. The humans had predicted his strategy, countered his tactics, and escaped without a single casualty. They had made his empire look foolish, and they had done it while broadcasting to the entire galaxy. The assembly noticed. Other species began to whisper that they were losing control of the situation. Some quietly reached out to human representatives, exploring the possibility of improved relations. Others simply watched, waiting to see how the conflict would develop. Dr. Torres continued her work on Mars, far from the battles in space. Her research had reached a critical phase, and she spent 20-hour days in the laboratory, surrounded by equipment that represented humanity's most advanced biological science. Her team had grown from a dozen scientists to over 100, all working toward a single goal. The virus she was developing was not meant to kill directly. That would have been too simple, too merciful. Instead, it targeted their reproductive systems, designed to reduce their fertility by 90% over the course of a generation. A species that could not replace its losses would eventually fade away. It was genocide in slow motion, a fate worse than any battlefield defeat. Some of her team questioned the ethics of what they were creating. They had joined the project to help humanity survive, not to destroy an entire species. Dr. Tors listened to their concerns without judgment, then explained her perspective. They chose this war when they killed New Eden. They broadcast the deaths of 10 million people as entertainment. They made children watch their parents die. They laughed at our suffering. She paused, her voice steady but cold. I watched my daughter burn on that broadcast. She was 7 years old. She was scared. She didn't understand why the sky was on fire. The scientists stopped questioning. They understood that their work was not revenge but justice. They had shown humanity no mercy. They would receive none in return. The virus was almost complete. It needed only a delivery system, a way to spread across the colonies. Dr. Tors had ideas about that too, ideas that would make the extinction both inevitable and untraceable. On Earth, President addressed the population on the 2nd anniversary of the New Eden massacre. The speech was broadcast to every human colony, every ship in space, every citizen of the growing human civilization. She spoke of loss and grief, of the 10 million lives that had been stolen. She spoke of the years of preparation, the sacrifices that had been made, the work that remained to be done. We did not start this war, she said. We did not choose to be hunted, to be slaughtered, to be treated as entertainment for a cruel empire, but we will finish it. We will show the galaxy that humanity is not prey. We will make them understand that some debts can never be repaid, only collected. The speech ended with a moment of silence for the dead. Across human space, billions of people stopped what they were doing and remembered. They remembered the names of the fallen, the faces in the broadcast, the final message of Captain Maria Santos. They remembered why they were fighting and what they were willing to sacrifice. Then they returned to work. The shipyards continued producing vessels. The training facilities continued developing soldiers. The laboratories continued refining weapons. Humanity was building an army that would shake the galaxy. They noticed the preparations but could not stop them. Their attempts to blockade human space failed repeatedly. Their ships ambushed and destroyed before they could establish positions. Their spies in human territory were discovered and captured. Their intelligence networks dismantled. Every strategy they attempted was countered before it could take effect. Admiral coordinated the defense from his command center, but he knew that defense was not enough. The Forgotten-class ships were effective, but they were limited in number. They could hunt patrols and harass supply lines, but they could not destroy the Empire. For that, humanity needed something more. Project Sky Forgotten entered its final phase. The project had 3 components. The first was the Forgotten Fleet, 200 ships built in secret, each one a weapon of precision and stealth. The second was the biological weapon Dr. Tors was developing, the virus that would ensure extinction even if humanity lost the war. The third was something no one had expected. Director Stone called it the network. It was a system of informants and allies scattered across the galaxy, species that had suffered under aggression and were willing to help humanity succeed. Some provided intelligence. Some offered sanctuary. Some were preparing to take their own revenge when the moment came. They believed they were fighting a single species. In reality, they were fighting a coalition that had grown in the shadows, united by shared hatred and common purpose. When humanity finally struck with full force, they would not face the Empire alone. David Park received new orders 6 months after the failed ambush. He was to lead a squadron of 12 Forgotten-class ships on a mission deep into territory. Their target was a military shipyard, one of the largest in the Empire, where new warships were being constructed to replace those humanity had destroyed. The mission was extremely dangerous. The shipyard was surrounded by defense platforms, patrol fleets, and sensor networks that would detect any conventional approach. Success required perfect coordination, absolute precision, and complete commitment. David assembled his team. Pilots and operators he had trained with, fought alongside, and trusted with his life. They gathered in a briefing room on a hidden station, reviewing the intelligence and planning their approach. Every detail was discussed, every contingency prepared. "We will lose ships on this mission," David told them honestly. "Maybe all of us. They will be waiting, and they will fight to the death to protect that shipyard. I need to know that every one of you understands what we're going to do and why we're doing it." A pilot named Sarah spoke up. She was 28 years old, a former atmospheric pilot who had transferred to space operations after New Eden. Her brother had been a teacher on the colony. "My brother sent a message right before the attack," she said. "He told me he was proud of me, proud of what I had accomplished. He said he was looking forward to seeing me again." She paused, her expression hard. "They killed him before that message even reached me. They killed 10 million people for entertainment. I don't care if I die on this mission. I only care that we make them bleed." The others nodded. They all had stories like Sarah's. They all had reasons to risk everything. David felt proud of them, and he felt the weight of responsibility for their lives. He would lead them into the most dangerous mission humanity had ever attempted. Some would not return, but those who did would carry with them the knowledge that they had struck a blow against an empire that had believed itself invincible. "We launch in 48 hours, he said. "Get some rest. When we move, we don't stop until the job is done." The attack on the shipyard was planned as a coordinated strike from multiple angles. The 12 Forgotten-class ships would approach from different vectors, timing their arrival to overwhelm the defense systems before they could coordinate a response. The shipyard's shields would be targeted first, followed by the construction bays and power systems. If everything went according to plan, the entire facility would be destroyed in less than 30 minutes. Nothing went according to plan. They had anticipated an attack on their shipyards. They had reinforced the defenses, adding patrol ships and sensor platforms that had not appeared in humanity's intelligence. When the Forgotten Fleet emerged from stealth, they found themselves facing twice the opposition they had expected. David made a decision in seconds. He ordered half his force to engage the defense platforms while the other half proceeded to the shipyard. The split reduced their effectiveness against both targets, but it prevented the mission from failing completely. The battle was intense. Ships swarmed the human vessels, pouring fire that lit up the void between stars. The Forgotten-class ships were faster and harder to hit, but they were outnumbered 4-1. Within minutes, 3 human ships had been destroyed. Sarah flew her ship directly into the heart of the defense network, drawing fire from multiple platforms simultaneously. Her vessel took hit after hit, armor plates melting under concentrated plasma bursts. She kept flying, kept firing, kept fighting. "All ships, I'm going to create an opening," she transmitted. "Take the shot when you see it." David understood what she was planning. "Sarah, no, we can find another way." "There isn't time. The shipyard is powering up its main defenses. If we don't hit it now, we never will." Her voice was calm, accepting. "Tell my brother I said hello." Sarah's ship accelerated toward the shipyard's shield generator, drawing every weapon in range. Her vessel disintegrated under the combined fire, but her momentum carried the wreckage forward. The debris struck the generator at tremendous speed, overloading the system and collapsing the shield. The shipyard lay exposed. David led the remaining ships through the gap, firing everything they had at the construction bays. New warships, still in their cradles, exploded as human weapons tore through their unfinished hulls. Power systems detonated. Fuel reserves ignited. The shipyard became a cascade of destruction, each explosion triggering more. 5 more human ships were lost in the attack, but when the survivors the shipyard was nothing but debris. Over 40 warships under construction had been destroyed. Thousands had died, and the Empire had learned that its industrial capacity was not safe from human vengeance. Commander received the news with cold fury. The shipyard had been the heart of his rebuilding efforts, the key to replacing the ships humanity had destroyed. Its loss set the Empire back by years. He demanded an emergency meeting with his military council. The officers gathered in his command chamber, their expressions ranging from concern to fear. They had never seen their commander so angry, so desperate for answers. How did they penetrate our defenses? How did they reach a target so deep in our territory? No one had answers. The humans were fighting in ways they had never encountered. They used ships that could not be tracked, weapons that could not be countered, tactics that could not be predicted. Every assumption they had made about warfare was proving wrong. An intelligence officer stepped forward, the youngest in the room. "Commander, I have been analyzing human behavior since the conflict began. I believe I understand their strategy." Turn to face him. Explain. "The humans are not trying to defeat us in battle. They are trying to exhaust us. Every ship they destroy, every shipyard they attack, every supply line they disrupt reduces our capacity to fight. Meanwhile, they grow stronger, they build more ships, they train more soldiers, they develop more weapons." The officer paused. "They are not fighting a war of months. They are fighting a war of years, and they are willing to sacrifice everything to win it." The room fell silent. The officers understood the implications. They had always won through overwhelming force, applied quickly and decisively. They were not prepared for an enemy that fought through attrition, that accepted losses as the price of eventual victory. Considered the analysis. The intelligence officer was right. The humans were playing a long game, and every passing month shifted the balance in their favor. If the Empire continued to fight this war on human terms, they would eventually lose. "We need to change our approach," he said finally. "We need to take the fight to them, to strike at them before they grow too strong." "Earth is heavily defended," another officer warned. "Any attack would be costly." "The cost of not attacking is higher." Began planning the largest military operation in history. He would gather every ship in the Empire, every warrior, every weapon. He would launch a massive assault on human space, targeting Earth directly. The humans had shown resilience, but they could not survive the destruction of their. He would finish what he had started at New Eden. He would destroy humanity completely. And this time, there would be no survivors to seek revenge. On Mars, Dr. Torres completed her work. The virus was ready. It had been tested on captured samples and refined until it worked exactly as intended. A single exposure would be enough. Within a generation, they would be unable to reproduce. Within 3 generations, they would be extinct. She transmitted her report to Admiral, who received it with mixed emotions. The weapon was terrible, a tool of genocide that violated every principle of civilized warfare. But they had violated those principles first. They had killed 10 million civilians for entertainment. They had broadcast the massacre to the galaxy. They had made clear that humanity's survival was not guaranteed. Authorized the weapons deployment. If they attacked Earth, if humanity faced extinction, the virus would be released. It was insurance, a guarantee that even in defeat, humanity would have the final word. David Park returned to the hidden station with the survivors of the shipyard attack. 7 ships had been lost. 7 crews, 49 operators who had followed him into battle and not come back. He knew each of them by name. He remembered their faces, their voices, their reasons for fighting. Sarah had been the bravest of them all. She had given her life to create the opening that made the mission successful. Her sacrifice would be remembered, her name added to the growing list of humanity's heroes. David did not feel like a hero. He felt tired, angry, and determined. The war was not over. They were still dangerous, still capable of destroying everything humanity had built. More battles lay ahead. More sacrifices would be required. He found Director Stone waiting for him in his quarters. She sat in his chair, reviewing reports on a tablet, looking as calm as if she were conducting routine business. "The shipyard mission was a success," she said without looking up. "They have lost their primary construction facility. It will take them years to replace it." "We lost 7 ships," David replied. 49 people. "Yes." Stone set down the tablet and met his eyes. "War is expensive. The question is whether the price is worth what we buy with it." David sat on his bed, suddenly exhausted. Was it worth it? The shipyard was producing 43 warships. Each of those ships could kill millions of humans. By destroying it, we saved billions of lives. Stone paused. The 49 who died would say it was worth it. They knew the risks. They fought anyway. David thought about that. He thought about Sarah, who had flown her ship into the heart of the defenses knowing she would not survive. She had done it without hesitation, without fear. She had done it because she believed in what humanity was fighting for. "What's next?" he asked. Stone smiled. It was still cold, but there was something else in it now. Respect, perhaps, recognition. "They are gathering their fleet. They're planning an attack on Earth, a massive assault meant to destroy humanity once and for all." She handed him the tablet. "We're not going to let that happen." David looked at the intelligence reports. The fleet was enormous, hundreds of ships drawn from every corner of their empire. It was the largest military force they had ever assembled, a sign of how seriously they now took the human threat. "This is everything they have," he said. "Yes, they're betting everything on one attack. If they succeed, humanity is finished. If they fail..." Stone left the sentence unfinished. David understood. If they failed, their empire would be defenseless. All their ships, all their warriors, all their strength would be concentrated in a single fleet. A fleet that could be destroyed. A fleet that would be destroyed. "When do we move?" he asked. "Soon, they will launch within weeks. We need to be ready to meet them." David stood up, his exhaustion forgotten. The final battle was approaching. The war that had begun with 10 million dead would end with billions of lives in the balance. He had trained for this moment, fought for this moment, sacrificed everything for this moment. He would not fail. The galaxy watched as both sides prepared for the confrontation that would determine the future. They gathered their strength, confident in their numbers and their power. Humanity waited in the shadows, ready to unleash weapons and tactics the Empire could not imagine. Sky Forgotten was about to become a reality. The species that had killed 10 million humans was about to learn what that name truly meant. And when the lesson was complete, the galaxy would never be the same. The fleet departed for Earth on what their calendar marked as the 847th anniversary of the Empire's founding. It was meant to be symbolic, a triumph that would cement dominance for another 1,000 years. Commander led the armada personally, standing on the bridge of his flagship as 412 warships fell into formation behind him. No species in galactic history had assembled such a force. The fleet stretched across hundreds of kilometers of space, bristling with weapons capable of destroying worlds. Each ship carried the finest warriors the Empire had produced, soldiers who had never known defeat. Their confidence was absolute. Their purpose was clear. Humanity would be exterminated. The journey to Earth would take 17 days through hyperspace. Use that time to review intelligence, refine tactics, and address his commanders. He spoke of glory and legacy, of the victory that would make their names immortal. The humans had proven troublesome, he admitted. They had struck from shadows and destroyed valuable resources, but shadows could not stand against the light of concentrated power. When the full might of the Empire descended upon Earth, no amount of clever tactics would save them. His commanders believed him. They had no reason to doubt. On Earth, Admiral watched the departure through long-range sensors that the Empire did not know existed. The fleet was exactly as large as intelligence had predicted. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior the possessed was heading toward human space. They had committed everything to this attack, holding nothing in reserve. It was exactly what humanity had been waiting for. Gathered his senior commanders in the secure facility beneath the Martian surface. The room was crowded with officers from every branch of the military, fleet admirals, ground commanders, intelligence directors, and specialists whose roles existed only in classified documents. They represented humanity's total military capacity, the product of 3 years of secret preparation. They have made their choice, began. They are coming for Earth with everything they have. They believe this will be the final battle of the war. He paused, looking around the room. They are correct about that, but not in the way they expect. He activated a holographic display that showed the approaching fleet. Red icons represented enemy ships, arranged in a formation designed for planetary assault. The display zoomed out, revealing human positions scattered throughout the region. Blue icons appeared, far more numerous than the red. Project Sky Forgotten becomes operational today. All assets are in position. All contingencies are prepared. When they arrive, they will face a force they never imagined we could field. Commander stepped forward to explain the tactical plan. The fleet would drop out of hyperspace at the standard emergence point, the safest location for their large formation. They expected to encounter whatever defenses humanity had prepared. Orbital platforms, defensive squadrons, perhaps some of the mysterious ships that had been hunting their patrols. They did not expect to emerge directly into a killing field. The Forgotten Fleet, now numbering 187 ships after combat losses, had positioned itself along the hyperspace emergence corridor. When they arrived, they would find human ships on all sides, already firing. The chaos of emergence would prevent effective defense. Dozens of ships would die in the first seconds of the battle. But that was only the beginning. Revealed the second phase, ground-based weapons on Luna that could target ships in high orbit, missile platforms hidden in asteroid belts, minefield laid along every approach vector, automated defense drones that would swarm enemy ships with suicidal precision. Humanity had turned the entire solar system into a fortress, a trap designed to destroy the largest fleet in galactic history. What about the virus? Someone asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Dr. Torres answered. She had been standing in the corner of the room, separated from the military officers by both distance and purpose. The biological weapon is ready for deployment. It will be released only if Earth faces imminent destruction. It is our guarantee that even in defeat, the will not survive. No one questioned that decision. The virus was terrible, but they had made their own choice when they killed New Eden. They had shown humanity what happened to species that could not defend themselves. Humanity had learned that lesson well. Concluded the briefing with simple words. We have prepared for this moment for 3 years. We have sacrificed friends, family, and our own peace of mind. Now we finish what they started. Now we show the galaxy what happens to those who attack humanity. He looked at each face in the room. No mercy. No mercy, they repeated in unison. David Park received his final orders aboard the UES Forgotten, his ship that had become legend among both humans and. He would lead the first wave of the attack, emerging from stealth positions the moment the enemy fleet arrived. His job was simple: cause chaos, draw fire, and survive long enough to see humanity's victory. He gathered his surviving squadron members, 12 ships with crews who had followed him through dozens of missions. They were the best humanity had produced, warriors forged in the crucible of a war they had never expected to fight. They knew the risks. They knew that many of them would not survive the coming battle. None of them considered retreat. "They killed my parents, my sisters, my grandmother," David told them. "They killed 10 million people and laughed about it. Tomorrow we stop laughing." The crews understood. They had all lost someone to New Eden. They had all watched the broadcast, felt the grief, transformed their sorrow into purpose. Tomorrow they would have their reckoning. Director Stone arrived at the station shortly before the battle was scheduled to begin. She found David alone in the observation deck, watching the stars that would soon be filled with war. She stood beside him in silence for a long moment. "You've done well," she finally said. "Better than I expected, better than anyone expected." David did not turn from the window. "I had good teachers." "You had purpose. That matters more than training." Stone paused. "After tomorrow, everything changes. Whether we win or lose, humanity will never be the same. The galaxy will never see us the same way." "I know." David finally looked at her. "Is that what you wanted? When you started building this program, when you turned people like me into weapons, was this your goal?" Stone considered the question carefully. "I wanted humanity to survive. I wanted the species that killed my world to pay for what they did. Beyond that, I didn't think about goals. Revenge has a way of consuming everything else." "Your world." Stone smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I was born on a colony that the destroyed 50 years before New Eden, a small settlement, only 10,000 people. Nobody remembers it now. The galaxy didn't care then either." She turned to face the stars. "When New Eden happened, I knew humanity would finally fight back. I made sure we were ready." David understood. Director Stone had carried her own grief for 50 years, waiting for the moment when she could act on it. New Eden had given her the opportunity. She had used it well. "Tomorrow we finish this," he said. "Tomorrow we begin finishing this," Stone corrected. "The battle will end quickly, one way or another, but the real work comes after, making sure no species ever threatens humanity again, making sure the galaxy remembers what we did and why." They stood together in silence, two weapons forged by loss, waiting for the war they had spent years preparing for. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at exactly the predicted coordinates. 412 warships, the greatest military force in galactic history, materialized in the space between Earth and Mars. Commander stood on his bridge, ready to give the order that would begin humanity's extinction. He never got the chance. The forgotten fleet attacked before the ships had completed their transition to normal space. Weapons fire erupted from seemingly empty void, precise shots that targeted engines and weapon systems. 37 ships were crippled in the first 10 seconds of the battle. Another 24 were destroyed completely, their crews dying before they understood what was happening. Chaos swept through the formation. Ships that had been in perfect alignment suddenly scattered, trying to evade attacks from enemies they could not see. Commands conflicted as officers shouted over each other. The discipline that had defined the Empire for 800 years shattered in moments. David Park led his squadron through the heart of the fleet, firing continuously as he went. His ship twisted and spun through formations of enemy vessels, too fast to track, too small to hit. Behind him, his squadron mates did the same, each one a needle of destruction threading through the confusion. Commander screamed orders that no one could follow. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, their ships appearing and disappearing faster than his sensors could track. He had prepared for a siege, a systematic destruction of Earth's defenses. He had not prepared for an ambush that made his entire fleet a target. The second wave of human attacks came from a direction they had not expected, below the plane of the solar system, where nothing should have been positioned. 50 more ships emerged from hiding, these ones larger and more heavily armed. They were the backbone of the new human fleet, vessels designed for direct combat rather than stealth operations. The finally began to organize their defense, forming battle groups that could support each other. They concentrated their fire, trying to destroy human ships through sheer volume of weapons. Some shots connected. Human ships began to die. But for every human ship lost, 10 vessels were damaged or destroyed. The ratio was unsustainable. The Empire was bleeding out in the void between worlds. Made a desperate decision. He ordered his remaining ships to break formation and head directly for Earth. If they could reach the planet, they could still accomplish their mission. The human fleet could not defend both the battle space and there simultaneously. 247 ships broke through the human lines and accelerated toward Earth. They left behind the wreckage of their fleet, the bodies of their comrades, the illusion of their invincibility. They ran toward the only victory still possible. Admiral watched them come from his command center on Luna. He had anticipated this possibility. He had prepared for it. "Activate the grid," he ordered. Earth's lunar defense network came online simultaneously. Thousands of weapons platforms emerged from hidden positions across Luna's surface, targeting the approaching fleet. They fired together, a wall of destruction that met the ships head-on. The leading wave of enemy vessels disintegrated under the concentrated fire. Ships that survived the first barrage flew directly into the second. The defense grid was relentless, automatic systems targeting and destroying with mechanical precision. Its flagship was hit 17 times before it finally lost power. The great vessel spun helplessly in space, its commander watching as his fleet was reduced to debris around him. He had brought 412 ships to destroy humanity. Less than 60 remained operational. The human fleet caught up with the survivors, surrounding them with firepower they could not escape. The Forgotten-class ships that had hunted patrols for 3 years now closed in for the final kill. There was nowhere to run. There was no one coming to help. There was only the choice between death and surrender. Some ships chose death. They charged at the human positions, firing until their weapons were empty and their engines failed. They died as warriors, proud and defiant. Most chose surrender. Escape pods filled the space around crippled warships. Officers transmitted their capitulation on all frequencies. The will to fight had been broken, the certainty of victory transformed into the reality of defeat. Commander watched his empire die from the observation port of his ruined flagship. Emergency lights flickered across damaged consoles. The bodies of his officers lay where they had fallen. The bridge that had commanded the greatest fleet in galactic history was now a tomb. A human ship approached slowly, carefully. It docked with the flagship and boarding parties entered through the breach. They moved with professional efficiency, securing corridors and taking prisoners. They were not cruel. They were not merciful. They were simply completing a task. David Park led the team that found Commander on the bridge. The commander stood among the wreckage of his command, his 4 arms at his sides, his burning eyes fixed on the human who had defeated him. "You are the one they call forgotten," said. It was not a question. David nodded. "And you are the one who killed 10 million people for entertainment." It was war. It was necessary. Your species needed to understand its place. David stepped closer until he was face to face with the creature who had destroyed his family, his home, his entire understanding of what the galaxy was supposed to be. He felt the rage that had driven him for 3 years, the grief that had never faded, the determination that had carried him through impossible battles. "You were right about one thing," David said quietly. "We needed to understand our place. We understand it now." He turned and walked away. Guards took into custody, removing him from the bridge that had been the center of his power. The commander would face trial for his crimes. He would answer for New Eden, for the broadcast, for every life his empire had taken. Justice would be slow, methodical, and absolute. But justice was only part of humanity's plan. The next phase began while the battle debris still filled the space around Earth. Human ships, loaded with special cargo, departed for space. They traveled to the colonies, to every planet where the species that had killed New Eden made its home. Dr. Tor's virus was released simultaneously across 37 worlds. The delivery systems were perfect, invisible pathogens that spread through air and water, through contact and proximity. Within days, every in existence would be exposed. Within a generation, their population would begin to decline. Within 3 generations, they would be extinct. Some human leaders questioned the decision. They argued that conventional victory was enough, that genocide was unnecessary now that the war was won. They believed humanity should show mercy, demonstrate that they were better than the species they had defeated. President listened to their arguments. She understood their concerns. She rejected them. "They killed 10 million people," she said in a private meeting with her cabinet. "They broadcast it as entertainment. They laughed at our suffering and expected the galaxy to join them. We showed them mercy once when we gave them 40 years to prove they could be part of civilized society. They responded by trying to exterminate us." She paused. "There will be no second chance. There will be no mercy. The galaxy will remember what happens to those who attack humanity, and they will never make the same mistake." The virus was already spreading. The decision was already made. Humanity had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen. A species that would accept any cost, pay any price, and commit any act to ensure its survival and punish its enemies. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session to address the aftermath of the battle. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the transformation of the galaxy's political landscape. The Empire, the most powerful military force in known space, had been destroyed in a single day. Humanity, the young species that everyone had dismissed as insignificant, had proven itself capable of impossible feats. Some representatives expressed concern about humanity's methods. The stealth technology, the advanced weapons, the ruthless efficiency of their tactics, these suggested capabilities that threatened the balance of power. If humans could destroy what would prevent them from destroying anyone else who challenged them? Other representatives had different reactions. Species that had suffered under aggression expressed quiet satisfaction. Empires that had watched the New Eden broadcast with horror felt that justice had been served. Civilizations that valued strength over diplomacy began to reconsider their relationship with humanity. The human ambassador addressed the assembly near the end of the session. His name was Wei, a career diplomat who had argued for peace until New Eden made peace impossible. Now he stood before the galaxy's representatives with a different message. 3 years ago, they killed 10 million of our people. They broadcast their deaths as entertainment. They believed we were too weak to respond, too insignificant to matter, too primitive to pose any threat. He paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. They were wrong. We did not want this war. We did not seek this confrontation. We came to the stars hopping to find friends, partners, civilizations that would help us grow and learn. Instead, we found an empire that saw us as prey, as entertainment, as lessons for other species considering resistance. Today, the empire exists only in history. Their fleets are destroyed. Their military power is broken. Their future is uncertain. The last word carried weight that everyone in the room understood. Humanity stands ready to take our place among the great powers of this galaxy. We hope that place will be as partners, as allies, as friends. But make no mistake, Wei's voice hardened. We remember what was done to us. We remember the faces of 10 million dead. We remember the laughter of those who killed them, and we will never allow it to happen again. Any species considering aggression against humanity should study what happened to They should understand that we are not prey. We are not entertainment. We are not insignificant. He leaned forward. We are humanity, and we have very long memories. The assembly voted to recognize humanity as a major galactic power. They voted to accept human representatives on the Security Council. They voted to form new alliances and trade agreements that would integrate humanity into the fabric of galactic civilization. They also voted, quietly and without formal record, to never provoke humanity to war again. David Park returned to Earth a hero. The media called him the forgotten ace, the pilot who had led humanity's most dangerous missions, the warrior who had boarded its flagship and accepted his surrender. Crowds gathered wherever he went, desperate to thank him, to touch him, to confirm that he was real. He did not feel like a hero, he felt empty. The rage that had driven him for 3 years was gone. The grief remained, dulled by time and exhaustion but never truly fatting. His parents were still dead. His sisters were still dead. His grandmother was still dead. Victory had not brought them back. Nothing would bring them back. Director Stone found him standing at the New Eden Memorial, a vast structure that had been built to honor the 10 million who had died. The walls were covered with names, too many to read in a single lifetime. Somewhere in that ocean of letters were the people David had lost. "You're supposed to be at the celebration," Stone said. "I've celebrated enough." David did not turn from the wall. "I wanted to tell them it's over. We won. They can rest now." Stone stood beside him in silence. She understood. She had visited her own memorials, her own walls of names, her own reminders of why she had dedicated her life to vengeance. Victory was supposed to bring closure. It rarely did. "What will you do now?" she asked. David considered the question. For 3 years, his entire existence had been focused on a single purpose, making the pay for what they had done. Now that purpose was fulfilled. The enemy was defeated. The debt was collected. The war was over. "I don't know," he admitted. "I never expected to survive this long. I didn't make plans for after." Most of us didn't. Stone reached into her pocket and produced a small device. "The program is continuing. There are other threats in the galaxy, other species that might think humanity is weak enough to attack. We need people like you to make sure they never try." David took the device. It contained contact information, orders, and a new mission. The war with them was over, but humanity's place in the galaxy was still being established. There was work to do, threats to counter, enemies to discourage. "You don't have to accept," Stone said. "You've done enough, more than enough. No one would blame you for walking away." David thought about it. He thought about his family, about the lives they had wanted him to live. His mother had hoped he would be an engineer, building things instead of destroying them. His father had wanted him to be happy. His grandmother had just wanted to see him again. They were gone. He could not give them what they wanted, but he could make sure their deaths meant something. He could make sure no other family suffered as his had suffered. "I'll do it," he said. "I'm not ready to stop fighting." Stone nodded. There was understanding in her eyes and something that might have been respect. "Good. The galaxy needs to remember what we can do, and you're the best reminder we have." The years that followed were ones of transformation. Humanity expanded rapidly, claiming new systems and establishing colonies throughout the region. The technologies developed for war were adapted for peace. Faster ships, better communications, more efficient resource extraction. Human civilization flourished as it never had before. The declined as Dr. Torres had designed. Birth rates dropped. Populations aged without replacement. Colonies that had once bustled with activity became quiet, then empty. The empire that had ruled 37 systems for 800 years faded away within 50 years, their species reduced to scattered remnants that could never threaten anyone again. Some humans felt regret. They wondered if the virus had been necessary, if conventional defeat would have been enough. They questioned the morality of extinction, even for an enemy that had tried to exterminate them first. Most humans did not question. They remembered New Eden. They remembered the 10 million faces. They remembered what it felt like to be prey, to be entertainment, to be insignificant. They had learned that the galaxy respected strength and forgot weakness. They had become strong. They would never be weak again. The Galactic Assembly adapted to the new reality. Humanity's representatives spoke with authority that came from proven power. Other species listened when humans offered opinions. Conflicts that once would have been ignored now received attention if humanity expressed concern. Some called it fear, others called it respect. The difference, as humanity had learned, was largely academic. David Park continued his work for another 30 years. He led missions across the galaxy, confronting threats before they could grow dangerous, reminding potential enemies what humanity was capable of. He trained new generations of operators, passing on the skills and knowledge that had won the war against the. He never married. He never had children. The part of him that could have built a normal life had died on New Eden with his family. What remained was purpose, dedication, and the cold satisfaction of a job well done. When he finally retired, he was 73 years old. His body was worn from decades of combat. His mind was sharp but tired. He had given everything he had to the species that had created him, and there was nothing left to give. He returned to the New Eden Memorial on the anniversary of the massacre. 50 years had passed since that terrible day. The memorial had expanded, surrounding a vast garden where families came to remember those they had lost. Children played on grass that grew from soil imported from Earth, their laughter filling air that held no memory of fire. David found the names he was looking for: his parents, his sisters, his grandmother. He touched each one, tracing the letters with fingers that had pulled triggers and pressed buttons that destroyed warships. These hands had killed thousands of. These hands had helped reshape the galaxy, but they had never been able to save the people whose names were carved into this wall. "I did what you asked," he said quietly. "I made them pay, every single one of them." The wind carried his words away. There was no answer. There never would be. He stood there for a long time, an old warrior at the end of his journey, remembering the young man who had lost everything and found purpose in destruction. He wondered what his family would have thought of what he had become. He wondered if they would have understood. A child ran past him, chasing a ball that had rolled across the garden. Her laughter was bright and pure, the sound of a future that 10 million people had died to protect. David watched her play, watched her mother scoop her up and spin her around, watched a family enjoy peace that had been purchased with blood. This was why he had fought. This was what the sacrifices had been for. Not revenge, though revenge had been part of it. Not justice, though justice had been served. This was about survival. This was about ensuring that humanity's children could laugh in gardens and play in sunlight and never know what it felt like to be prey. David Park smiled for the first time in years. It was a small smile, brief and uncertain, but it was real. The weight he had carried for 5 decades shifted, not disappearing but settling into something bearable. The dead would never come back, but their deaths had meant something. Their sacrifice had built this future. He turned away from the memorial and walked toward the exit. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded him of Earth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new reasons to remain vigilant. But tonight he could rest. Tonight he could remember. The galaxy continued to turn, indifferent to the struggles of the species that lived within it. Empires rose and fell. Wars began and ended. Civilizations expanded and contracted across the endless void. Through it all, humanity endured. They had learned their lesson well. They had paid the price in blood and grief, and the pieces of their souls that could never be recovered. They had transformed themselves from prey into predators, from victims into victors, from insignificant newcomers into powers that shaped the fate of stars. Sky Forgotten was no longer just a military doctrine. It was a philosophy. It was an identity. It was the name humanity gave to itself when it looked in the mirror and saw what it had become. Other species remembered the lesson too. They remembered the once the mightiest empire in the galaxy, reduced to nothing by a species they had dismissed as primitive. They remembered the broadcast of New Eden, the deaths of 10 million people, and the price that had been paid for that cruelty. They remembered, and they were careful. Humanity had proven that it would not be prey. Humanity had demonstrated that attacks would be answered with overwhelming force. Humanity had shown that mercy was not guaranteed, that forgiveness was not automatic, that some crimes would be punished with extinction. The galaxy was not a friendly place. It was not fair or just or merciful. It was a competition for survival, a struggle for resources and territory and the right to exist. They had understood that and used their strength to crush those weaker than themselves. Humanity understood it now too. They used their strength to protect what was theirs and punish those who threatened it. They were not cruel. They were not aggressive. They were simply survivors, willing to do whatever was necessary to ensure their species continued. The 10 million dead of New Eden would never be forgotten. Their names remained carved in memorials across human space. Their faces appeared in documentaries and histories that taught new generations about the war that had shaped their civilization. Their sacrifice was honored in ceremonies and speeches, and the quiet moments when individuals remembered what had been lost. But more importantly, their deaths had meaning. They had not died in vain. They had died as the spark that ignited humanity's transformation, the catalyst that turned a peaceful species into something the galaxy would never underestimate again. They killed 10 million humans live. They broadcast it as entertainment. They laughed at the suffering they caused. Sky Forgotten made them pay. And the galaxy would never forget what humanity was capable of when pushed too far.